All right, we're back. We are COMP308. That is Emerging Technologies in the winter 2017 semester at Centennial, and we are week 9, part 1 of our broadcast. We have a very complex part to our semester today. I keep saying that. Last week was really important. I think we talked about model view and controller. I think that was a good part. This week, what I'd like to try and do is create our Restful API, right? So far, what we've been doing with our project, and I'm just going to bring up a project that we've been working with lately. So we were working with project 8B last week, right? And I'm going to extend 8B and make it 9B, right? So 8B Angular is what I'm talking about. There's 2 parts, one that was without Angular and one that was with Angular. So I'm going to take 8B and duplicate it for now, and then create 9B. And I'm going to do the same thing that we normally do, which is as I create my project, let's do this thing. What does it say here? OneDrive is up to date. Why am I getting a little link here? It's an X. Who knows why that X is there? Maybe I'm full. Yeah, so I'm going to go to bower.json and change all this, and it says, instead of saying 8B Angular, it's going to say 9B. And this will be 9, and it's mean crud is what it's going to be the title of today, mean crud. Good luck. We can't do all mean crud. I think we're going to, what I'm thinking about now after today, the first session, and Aaron's still here to help me out to try and fix it. We couldn't finish it. And maybe if we can do this, I want to try and finish it next week. And not that I want to, it's going to put off our schedule a little bit, but that's okay because I want everyone to understand what we're doing. Otherwise, Angular becomes unusable, right? And I don't want it to be unusable. If we're going to use Angular, let's use it, right? So we have a bit of a problem, and one of the problems are we're just not getting output. We've tried. I've worked on it pretty much all week to try and get it going. It's not our project. It's some small detail that's stopping us from making things work, and I'll explain as we go. But I'm telling you, this is a normal course of, from a developer perspective, this is what happens sometimes. All right. When we work on a project and we're using newer technologies, at times what we get is, we don't know how to do something. And even if you look at the API documentation or online, because Angular 2 is so new, there's not a lot of description of or fixes for our problem, right? Which you'll see what it is later. So just bear with it. It's not for you to get, I don't think you should worry about it. It's not going to be on any test or exam. What I wanted to do is try and present Angular to you in a way that you could use it with your Express and Node application. Like right now, you're connecting to Mongoose through MLab, let's say, and you've got Express running the server side, the routing, and Node is your server on the back end. And if you add Angular on the front end, it becomes beautiful, right? However, the Angular part on the front end to create the mean stack from scratch, the way we have everything laid out, using Angular, using a service from Angular, it's just not working out with the build that we currently have. So I'm not sure what it is yet. We're going to try and troubleshoot, and then by next week, I'm sure we'll have an answer. So I'm just letting you know, I'm kind of setting up expectations. I don't expect this to work today. We're not going to have a lab today. There won't be one of those. However, next week, we will be talking about project 1, or the final project for this semester. And there might be also another assignment, because we also have another module we have to study on web services, right? So we'll see how that goes. So again, we might be slightly behind the other class in terms of getting that done, but that's only because I want to make sure we cover Angular very well. This isn't an Angular class, but I just feel we're just giving it such a glancing blow. And some people had issues with their lab last week. Remember that it's not compiled. If in the lab itself, if there is a .gitignore file, as an example, instead of just having node modules, if it has also star.js, that means that none of the JavaScript modules or files are going to be uploaded to GitHub If they're not on GitHub, you can't put it on Azure because browsers don't understand TS, right? It needs to be transpiled. Everything has to be sent up on GitHub, and then it'll work, right? And I think that's what some of you had problems with. Now, some of you were able to use the Angular CLI to get it done. Mentioning Aaron as the person that got it done that way. But, you know, for the most part, I think everyone had issues, right, with this. So, I mean, you know, from a marking perspective, remember what I'm going to do. It's a bonus, right? If you got it done, great. If you didn't get it done, I'll give you part marks, part bonus. You might get 1.5 out of 2, right? As long as it works locally for me, I'm going to be happy with you finishing off your tour of heroes, right? And as long as you took care of the other piece. Okay, so as I've been talking, I've kind of rejigged my application here. And what I'm going to do now with this one is, like I've always done, I'm going to open up this application in the terminal. Here's 9b, and I'm going to kill the Git repository that's in there right now. So I'm going to say rm-rf .git. Again, if you're a Windows user, just right-click on the .git folder and get rid of it, right? And git init, git add dot, git commits -m, initial commit. There we go. And now I need a Git repository to put this up on, and I'm going to put this up here on GitHub. And we're going to go with COMP308, winter 2017. Lesson 9b. There we go. Grab that. Grab all this stuff. Copy it. And away we go. Okay. So that part's done. So the part that we have, your tutorial file for today is up on GitHub, right? So this is what we're working with. We're working with 9b. Up until now, when we run our application, right? So if you look at our application structure, and if I run this locally, remember the way to run it locally now is to use npm start, right? So if I use npm start, I got a problem because, why do I have a problem with npm start? Why does it cause me this issue? Because chances are I don't have my node modules installed. So I'm going to do npm install, which is going to install my node modules, right? And then after I've got all my modules, I'm going to talk about some alternatives we found out in the first class. This is a great thing, Aaron, about, so once you do the first class and fail at the first class, like I did, right? You have a chance to improve things a little bit in the second class and to make it a little easier. So one of the things I'm going to do in the second class is I'm going to talk about veering away from using node npm start again and going back to using nodemon. But we need to be able to transpile our files automatically when we save, and we're going to set up something called a little task runner. We've done this before, but I want to show you how to do it with Visual Studio Code, because Visual Studio Code allows you to create a task runner. So whenever you save your files, it transpiles it to TypeScript. All right, so I'm finishing installing my npm modules. All my node modules got installed. Now, what I want to do, first of all, remember that in order for you to use TypeScript, you must have it, installed locally, or at least use it with the development version that's installed with your modules here. Okay, so I want to transpile my project. Notice that inside my client, in my app, I have a bunch of TS files, right? And just to show you this, I'm going to get rid of them, the JavaScript file sides. So I'm going to get rid of this and get rid of this one. Just get rid of them all. Any JavaScript. I'm going to try and show you how you can transpile manually here. So, because I know that some people don't understand how to do that. Most of you have seen me do it before, so it's not like anything new, but just bear with me while I do this. I'm just gonna, and I mean, I could definitely go through the file system and get rid of them a little faster, but I mean, it gives me a chance to get you to catch up as well. One more. All right, so we have really 3 files, right? App component, bootstrap.js. Oh, did I kill one? Yeah. I killed the wrong one. We'll just put it back from the other side, the other file. Which one did I kill? Bootstrap, app component, app module. App modules got killed. Did I kill it this way? I did. Here's app module. Can I drag and drop it? Maybe I can, maybe I can't. There you go, that module. Yeah, so you have 3 files in here normally, right? But what happens is when you transpile, now you have like 9, right? You get 1 for your JS, so that's double, and you get another .map file. That's all decided down in here in your tsconfig.json file, right here. This piece right here tells TypeScript what to look for and what to avoid. One thing to note is we noticed that earlier today, when we moved away from using module, we're going to use common.js. That was the one change we made. So common.js is what we want to use here. This is under tsconfig.json. All right. Just from a modular system perspective. Okay. 1. I'm going to save this file. Okay, now I want to transpile. So how do I do that? So if you're using Visual Studio Code, it's Control-Shift-B. Control-Shift-B. And it's going to set up a task runner. If you're a Mac, Command-Shift-B. It's going to look like this. The task runner bar is going to come up like this. And then you're going to click on Configure Task Runner. If you notice down here, there's a bunch of options. Well, the one we want is TypeScript Watch Mode, this one. What this does is it declares a task runner, right? So it kind of configures one for us. And it looks like this, right? So here's the TSC command. This is our TypeScript command. -W, or the -W, is an argument that says watch. So watch for any files that get changed, any files inside of a project. And when you, if you see a file that's changed, or if it hasn't been compiled yet, transpile automatically, right? And it's going to keep going. But you have to do it one more time. Now, before we do this, what's going to also happen is it's going to try and transpile other files we don't want it to. So definitely in your tsconfig.json, you have some excludes, an excludes section like node modules and some other typings, which we don't need. So let's take out the typings. But one thing we do need is inside of our, remember, inside of our client-side scripts folder, we also have a lib folder. And in our lib folder, we have Bootstrap and FontAwesome and jQuery. It's going to try and do that in there too. So make sure you include in here, get rid of this, include scripts lib. And that would be under content scripts lib. Client scripts lib, because that's on the client now, client folder script lib. We don't want to, definitely do not want to compile anything in this folder, right? Because that is files that come from somewhere else. Also, we don't want to compile any .md files, right? So if I want to do it, I want to say no MD files, nothing with star.md in it. And the double star pattern, this one here says, don't include any MD files and make sure it's recursive across all directories, right? So we don't want that. Okay, now that we've done that, I'm ready to transpile for the first time. Again, I'm going to watch this folder here. Here are these folders, just like we've done before. I'm going to Command-Shift-B, and if I did everything properly on the left-hand side, just this little spinner, and then boom, I get all my files back. Okay. I have one warning. Okay, my warning is invalid relative reference link in my nodejs.org under my client scripts lib jQuery. Even though I told it not to go into my README file, it went anyway. I'm just pointing this out so you understand. It doesn't matter what I put in sometimes. Okay. But that's one warning. The rest, there's no errors, right? And now I'm ready to use NodeMon. So I've transpiled my entire everything. And guess what now? Anytime I change something, like for example, if I go into my app module.ts and I add a comment, like here for now is a comment that we're going to get rid of later. If I press save, it's going to spin. It's going to spin and transpile again, right, automatically. And notice that JavaScript is a reflection of what was in the TypeScript. It's much cleaner, the TypeScript. Okay. And now I can run NodeMon at the same time. So I'm going to clear the screen here and run NodeMon. And what NodeMon will do is run everything local. Please remember to launch your local version of MongoDB. And then just to show you what we got so far from last time, if I run localhost 3000, I should get this. Hello, Angular. Are you with me? No. Why are you not with me?
Which TypeScript, or not, which configure did you pick?
The -W, the watch. There's a watch configuration. You see that? On the task runner, there's two configurations. One that's TypeScript that tsconfig, and there's another one that says watch. That's the one you want to pick. Are we good? Yes. Command-Shift-B on the Mac or Control-Shift-B on a PC? Control-Shift-B, yeah. Okay. You have to do it again. You have to run it again the second time. So you run it once, configure your task runner, and then do it again. Command-Shift-B or Control-Shift-B to actually do the transpilation. Aaron, any progress? I thought. All right, let's continue. So notice what we're doing right now in our files and folders, right? I'm gonna point this out to you guys here. What's going on? Just as a review, right? We've got two sides of our application. We've got the client side that's front facing, and we've got the server side. Server side is got a bunch of folders. One of them is the views folder. And this is where all of our pages are being templated out. And we also have a models folder where our models for the database are stored, right? As well as a controllers folder, which we worked on hard last week to get it working, where we split out our data, our logic from our routing, right? That's what we did last week. And we noticed we did, here's our users, this are our methods for the users, how to log in, log out, and so on. I did another one for my index pages where I just display my home and display my contact pages. And I also have done one for my games.js, which is what I want to work on today. And I want to work on the read game list where I can actually display the game list through Angular. And we haven't been able to make that work, to be honest with you. We've been trying to use Angular and we can't get it done. I'm asking you guys for help. I'm asking you guys to help me out and see if you guys can help me make this work, because for the life of me, I can't. I got a lot of horsepower in here, like a lot of brains, that's what I meant, right? Horsepower. I said horsepower, right? Okay, better than something else. So lots of power in this room, and you guys have the ability to Google, at least 20 times faster than me, right? So with all you guys Googling at the same time, right, or in that range. So I think we can be able to find a solution for this problem together, right? All right, but let's start off. So we talked about what the problem is. We can't display stuff, but let's talk about what this thing does. So right now, if you notice, res render, right? It's rendering the whole page, the games list. But what we want to do, we want to form out something called a Restful API, and we're going to be using an output that's JSON, just pure JSON data. So there's not going to be any output from our API. There's not going to be a page. It's just going to send JSON out, okay? Now this is really important because if I got JSON data, I can consume that. I can use other services to eat that up, like, for example, a React front end, or hopefully Angular 2, right? And we're going to use a service to do that, an HTTP service. We haven't been able to make it work, but it doesn't mean we can't. It's not like it's impossible. And we might be taking the wrong approach. I don't know. But let's see what happens. By the way, I've been following the book example to get this going. All right, so this outputs a page, and where does it output? If I go back to our pages, if I log in, and I log in, I take me back to this page, and this is what it outputs, this data. And I basically take my data from the database and I display it in a table. That's where we are right now, right? And I have some control. I can add new games, I can edit games, I can delete games, all that stuff. Right? Nice. I want to be able to see this, not like this, but pure JSON, right? So right from the database, spit out to a page. How do I do that? Well, there's a couple ways. One way is I can actually put it on the page through EJS, but I don't want to even go through templates. I want to simply go right from my route to the page, and I can do that. Instead of doing a res render, I can do another command, and this is something new for you guys. So I'm just going to comment this out, this piece. And again, I'm sitting in, if you want to follow along, I'm in controllers on the server side under game.js. So here I've commented this piece out. And instead what I want to do is something like this. I want to do a res, that's a response. I want to put up the status. Let's put a status of 200, which means if I get a good response, status 200, I want to see JSON data, right? And I want to pump out for now just games. Okay? So what this is basically saying is, hey, when I get my games object, convert it to JSON, right, and pump it out to the HTML page. And there's your RESTful API if everything works. Let's see how this works. So I've just commented the page out. So I'm not going to the page anymore. I'm not doing my template, right? So if I do that and if I refresh this page, it's going to ask me to log in. And if I go back, I get this. And that's what I want, right? However, I'm missing some vital pieces of information from my page, right? This is one part, right? You can see that I'm just getting data. And this is what I want the Angular service to consume. It's not going to actually try and parse your page, like scrape your page. That doesn't make any sense. I want it to actually get data. This is a data stream. That's what this thing is, right? Now I got to be logged in. So it's a secure data stream as well, right? All right, so that's one thing I want to do. But I don't just want this. I also want the title. That information is important, right? Because if I'm going to render this thing in another view, right, an Angular view, I need the title. And I also need this, display name. I want to pass in the fact that I'm logged in or logged out, right? So instead of just passing in games, can I pass in this whole object? And of course, the answer is yes. So I can take this part, and instead of this, I can just do this, right? So now I'm passing in this whole object out to the JSON. It's basically the output. Okay, cool. So I go back out here, refresh, log in, and bam. Not only do I get that, but I got my title, and I also get my display name. This is good, right? This is half of it right there, plus everything else. Notice I get an array of games, which is what I want. It actually breaks it out for us. So I've got my list, and it's in a JSON format. Once I got this, guys, I can pass this to another service. I can do all kinds of stuff, which is really what I wanted. But I don't want to mess this up. I don't want to mess my games controller up, right? We worked hard to get this games controller working. So what I'd rather do is have a separate, I want to do two things actually. One thing I want to do is I want to make another path, if you will, another URL. Whenever I type in on the URL API, right, /games, / whatever I want to do, right, it's going to do it based on the API commands I put in. So that way I have some kind of interface for any user using any device, using some kind of front end to be able to consume my data, whether they're using Ajax or whether they're using, it's a website, right? Or whether they're using some kind of mobile device or whatever they're using, I want them to consume my data, right? So that's what I want to have. I want to have new paths. I just can't say games stuff. And I don't want my website to stop showing the game. I want you to be able to see the games that I want, right? But I want a separate API, separate link to actually, kind of show my my API data. All right. So that means I need two things. I need a new root, right? And I need new logic controllers, right? So how do I do that? So first, let's create the controller, and I'm going to just take a copy of my games controller and just rename it API.js, right? So I'm going to copy this and go into my controllers and paste. And now I'm going to rename this thing from games1.js to rename API.js. There we go. Okay, now notice how I did this. I showed JSON here, right? I'm going to go back to my games controller for a second and just put that back. I want to get rid of this and put it back to so I can see my games again. By the way, you can't do both. You do this, and this definitely will not show up, right? Because it's going to redirect. This will show up for like milliseconds, and then it's going to redirect to this. So you can't do both. And you can't do this and then this, because that's going to send off a status code of 200, and you've already sent your headers. So that's going to be a problem too. So let's get rid of this. Again, I'm just putting it back the way it was here in my game.js. But we have a copy in API.js. And what I want you to do now, and you can do this on your own, is go through anywhere where it says a render like this and replace it with JSON. Okay, so go ahead, try that out. So I'm just going to go through, and I want to get rid of anything that has a render. So here's a, oh, and this is really weird too. We have to think about this one. When we do the create, do we want to redirect? And my answer might be no after this. We'll have to think about how to do this later on, okay? But here's one. Here's a render, right, where I'm going to render my find by one. I want to find one page. I want to render that. So I want to find one. And also, notice that I have it encapsulated. This piece here, which is really the method, is encapsulated inside something else called display edit. I may want to break this out into its own method so I can access it directly, not like this. Okay? For now, let's leave it. So I'm going to take this piece right here. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go before this piece and do a res dot status 200. I'm going to pass in a status 200 if we did everything correctly, and then JSON, right? And then pass in that object. Okay, and then I can get rid of all this. Also, by the way, we didn't do this afterwards, is you can also res.error and redirect, right? So I can do something like res.status 400. You can do that too, and then redirect. So send statuses along the way to give your server a chance to understand what's going on. Like any kind of error like this, res.endError, I can say res.status 400, or whatever it's going to be. It might not be 400, it might be a 500 in this case. Error, right? It may not be, it might be something else, like a 500. Some kind of server error. And you can control all that. I'm not going to go through this and do that everywhere else, but anytime there's an error like this, that would be a nice example of an error we can do. Here's another render, display add. I want to kind of, render my page, but I mean, am I actually going to send JSON for this one? I mean, this is just displaying my add page. Probably not. And I probably don't even need it in my API at all, right? Remember, my API just doesn't display any pages. All it does is do the raw application, right? So this method, display add, doesn't make any sense to do, right? It normally renders this game details, but I don't need this right now, so I'm going to get rid of it. Okay, my create game I do need. This I can't get away without. I have to do this because I'm actually doing something. I'm actually adding games. However, this part, I'm not sure that I need that part. If I create my game, I do this and I don't redirect because there's no redirecting to be done. I just add things to the game. Remember, this is just an API, right? So it's only working on the back end. So I could very well get rid of this. So if my error, print the error. Otherwise, create my game. All right, so that's this part. Same thing with display edit. I'm never going to display the edit screen. Remember, I talked about this. What I really want to do is I want to find one game. That's what really I'm doing. This is find by ID, right? But what I want to do is instead of display edit, I want to call this find one game, right? Or, I don't know, read one or get one game or something like that. Or get game by ID. How about that? Get game by ID. There we go. This get game by ID, I don't need to do the other stuff. This part here, this actually displaying the game details and all this kind of stuff is okay. But this redirect stuff, where I redirect to 404, I mean, I guess I could do that, but that's not going to really do anything, right? So it's not like I'm going to do the details page. I'm never going to populate the details page ever, right? It's not for that in this API, right? So I'm not going to go to the details page. I'm just going to find by ID. If there's an error, show the error. If not, show the details inside my screen and populate the games and display name as well. All right, so I just renamed it because it makes more sense. Get games by ID. Update game, that can stay the same. And again, I'm not really doing anything, but I'm not going to redirect, so I can get rid of this part. Just updates. If there's an error, it's going to be an error, and we can spit out a 500 error. So that's just going to be some kind of server error. Delete game, same thing. I won't redirect. Because it won't do that kind of stuff. We'll just do what I'm asking you to do. Delete a game, update a game, find one game, get game by ID, right? It'll create a game, and it'll read the games lists. That's all it does, right? So that's all the API does. Now, it still needs models. I still need to get my games model, and I still need to get to Mongoose. This is all still good. Okay, so I've completed my API, okay? But I need a router for this, right? Are we good? Are you guys with me? I'm going slow, so I'm trying to find this out. Besides, the other stuff doesn't work anyway. If I go to routes, notice I have my index and my users and my games route. Well, I want this games route to be duplicated, but we're going to call it an API.js, right? So I want you to right-click on games. So this one here. Right-click, copy, go to routes, and then paste. And then change this routes from games1, rename this to API.js, okay? Now, notice my controllers. Do I really want my games controller? No, because that's the wrong thing. I want to point to my API, right? My controllers.api, my API controller, right? So rename this one. So this is called API controller. And this one is going to be controllers API. I'm just switching my controllers, API controller, to access games collection, right? That's what I'm doing here. All right, cool. So here are my roots, right? Now I'm going to come back to this in a second because this is a fine way of doing roots, right? Where I can delete and add and all this other stuff. This is all good, right? But this is not enough for me at all, right? And I'm going to show you why. All right, so I'm going to go back out to my app.js now. We've kind of added my roots. I haven't really changed any of them, right? I got create, I got read, I got display add. That's wrong. There is no display add. It's a find by ID, a find game by ID. That's what it is, right? So, and you can remember, we can find that. We can say, you know, get game by ID. So that's a little bit different. Oops. Arg is an enter. Yep. All right, I'll type it out. Get game by ID. All right, so that's what that does. That's the only change I made so far. So this gets the game details page in order to add a new game. No, we don't. We just add a new game. That's what it does, right? This does process the game page. This doesn't get the list page. It just displays the read. This is the read part. Gets game list, right? So this is the read. And these adds, right? This is the create, right? That's what this is. So this is the create. And remember, we're getting game, we're creating a game. We're displaying the edit page. Do I really care to display the edit page? And by the way, do I still even have that display edit? I don't think I do, right? So I don't care about the get. All I care about is posts for this one, right? Because the details page, I don't care about loading in the data, right? I just care about sending the data. Make sense? Now the problem is, and I'm going to point this out, when I post the data here, right? And we have to think about this post stuff, right? And same thing when I create a new one. Okay, when I create one, create game, or whether I post the game to update, if I go back to my controllers API, let's take a look at what it does, right? In order for me to do that, I get something called rec.user.displayname, right? My rec.user.displayname. Well, where is this coming from? Right, my request user display name, that's where it's coming from. Cool. But when I actually populate a new game, I need to get this information, my request, which means somehow, some way, I need to have some kind of interface to send me the request, my body and my name, or else I can't add, even if I wanted to. Just pointing it out, right? Right now we're using the form as a mechanism to get information from the user to update everything. And the same thing goes with this, right? Here's I can get my game by ID. Yeah, that's great. Fantastic. Get game by ID. But when it comes to updating a game, right, I need, again, to get this rec.body.name, which is going to be passed in here inside the request object. If I don't get the information that I need this object to be passed in here, then this will never work. So just, I mean, just to understand that, right? Because I'm not going to have a form anymore, right? It's just an API. It's just a back-end interface where I need to send this information. This request object has to be packed full of this, right? This is coming from, this is coming from this object up here, right? rec.body.name, rec.body.cost, and so on. And the same thing goes with this. This won't work. Rec ID, let ID is equal to rec params ID. Params ID is like your URL, the ID that comes from a URL. I'm not getting anything from my URL, so therefore this would also be useless. Just pointing it out, like we have to modify it later on. For today, all I care to do, right, is get this darn games list working. Right, this one. Read the list and populate it inside of an Angular front-end page, right? Not an Express page. All right. So again, some things I noted that we have to change. But one thing is, we can't access this roots anymore or the controller unless we have something in our app.js. So in our app.js, remember how we did this? We have in here an index, the main root, the top level roots. We have the games roots. That's the roots that are being used currently today, right now, for our games. Then we have our users roots for authentication. I want to make another one. I want to say let API equal to require, and then it's roots, and then API, right? That's what I want. Why? This is a API roots. Roots for the JSON API, right? Yes, that's what this does. So this is just that. Make this object here API represents that file we just made. That is just the routes, no redirection, no rendering of any kind of page. Okay, if I scroll down. Thank you for that. If I scroll down and I go down to this part, this is where I redirect my routes, right? Now we had / games and users. What I want mine to start off with is API, app.use. I see a route that starts with API. That means I'm calling the API, right? And I want to use the API object I described above. So API, so this returns my API, whatever the API is that I get, right? There's no links, there's nothing. That's it. So now this is okay, but if I go back to my routing for a second, and if I go to my API, that means if I go to here, this one, that means if I type in the URL, localhost / API, I should get my list, right? That's what this does, right? But I don't just want to go do this. Just to be safe, I want to add /games in front of everything. So I want to do something like this. So /games, /games. Hear me out why I'm doing this, right? So I want to say it's going to be like this: API games add, API games delete, API games edit, whatever it's going to, or ID. So games, just populating games in front of it like this. It also differentiates our roots a little bit more. All right, this is good, but I don't want just to have this. I also want to have the default, so I'm going to kind of copy this out again. And I wanted to take away this away as well. So both will work. API by itself will just give me the games list. And API /games will give me the games list. If I want to add, I can do that. Right? But when I add things in with my API, right? What does this do, get game by ID? I want to be able to pull it down, pull up that ID, right? So be careful what it says here. Right? And also, we may want to modify some of these roots. So this is add, but that's not really what I'm doing here. When I'm doing the get add, that doesn't make, I shouldn't be able to do that. Right? For now, we'll leave it as is, and I'll explain it later. All right, let's refresh. So I'm going to go back, log in again, and I still get this now. But if I go to API by itself, if I did everything properly, and I press enter, I get this. If I go API /games. I also get this because I put both those roots are equivalent. And. If I have an ID like this, and I can go things like, I can do one of these. I can say, that's why I put the games in there, right? API /games and put that in there, right? Well, hold on a second. I'm supposed to get my ID, right? How come that's not working? Because that should work, right? I got my ID here. Open API /game/ and then the ID. And if you go back to where I'm doing that, it's this games/:ID, where I display edit, right? That's what this is doing, which is really, is there a display? Where is there a display edit? There isn't. It's fine by, let's get game by ID again, right? I killed display edit, remember? Maybe you don't, but that's okay. So when I go to my roots, right, this part, and if I start typing API dot, you can see all the ones I can do. I can do a create game, delete game, get game ID, read my game list, or update my game. Those are the ones I can do. So I want this one. Okay, so let's get rid of this. So these both do get game by ID, and one does create, the other one does update. That makes more sense. And this one doesn't just do, this doesn't do create. This one just gets the game. This one processes the game's details page. But there's no process. This is just the create piece right here, right? All right, let's see if that works. So save, go back, fresh. It's going to stop again, of course, log in. Go to here, grab this piece, and just change this to API/games. Now I get one, right? So you can see that I can almost use the exact same commands, right? But I'm putting API in front of it, and that was my trick. I wanted to keep the link, games/ whatever, but I want to put API in front of it. Once I put API in front of it, I've got my data stream, okay, that's coming to me, right? And then I can take that data stream and do whatever I want with it afterwards. It's a big JSON data. So I got my title, which is my game details. And maybe that's correct, maybe that's not. I may have to change that title. This might be like get games or whatever it's going to be. I've got my, this is game details, right? The other one I have is my games array, which in this case only has one game with a name, a rating, and a cost, right? And then also my display name property, which is showing who is the person that's logged in that's doing this, right? Which is good to keep track of. And you can put a bunch of other ones too, if you really want to. Who logged in, the time they logged in, last login, are they authorized, what do they authorized to do, what's the You can put whatever you want in there, right? Now this is only for authorized users. Remember, you can't get to this page unless you're logged in, unless you're authorized. Okay, cool. So we've gotten this far. Is everyone cool with everything we've done just so far? All we've done is converted our stuff we're getting with our pages to JSON. And once we've done this piece of data, we can use this. Now this can be consumed by anything. This can be consumed by a device. This can be consumed by whatever you want, right? And this is where we have a lot of power as web programmers, right? Because we can create a back end that can be fed with a web interface to anybody, right? Now, hopefully, we've been trying to do it with Angular all day long. And Aaron says he's got some partial power, Captain. Scotty, you got power? You have partial power, Captain. I'm supposed to say. Okay, come on, answer properly. Scotty, you got power.
Partial power.
Captain. Thank you. You got to say Captain at the end, Russ. I'm not Captain. Right? Right? Yes. Aye.
Don't understand that.
Oh, of course not. Of course not. All right. I'm sorry. You know, but you have to look at partial power, Captain, right? If you look it up, right? And if you look at, you know, if you actually look up Star Trek sayings, Star Trek, Scotty, quotes. This guy here, right? I'm giving her all she's got, Captain.
Oh, yeah.
You know, remember that stuff? That's what you're doing. That's what you're kind of come up with, right? Live, learn, prosper. And, you know, he's got his quotes and everything else. We're not going to play these because I'll get in trouble. I'm recording. I can't record and then play at the same time, right? This one's great. I'm giving her all she's got, Captain. There's different ones, right? But these are old ones. The one I like a lot is, I've got partial power, Captain. My bridge is smashed. This kind of thing. Scotty, I don't have an hour. I need it now, right? Okay, Captain, I'll give it to you in 5 minutes, kind of thing, right? Scotty, the Scotty syndrome, right? Which is under promise and over deliver. I think I've talked about that lots of times, right? You always say I can't do it, and then somehow you're able to do it afterwards, right? Makes you look like a superstar. Anyways, so Aaron says we got partial power. He's kind of working on something. Our dilithium crystals are still drained, and he's trying to work on our warp engines so that we can get the ship going. And he's an engineer. He's been working on it all morning, and he still hasn't been able to fix it, right? So.
You may have forgotten to do a bootstrap.
What do you mean, me?
In the other module, in the
right.
module.
All right, we'll see if that's the point. All right, so this part is good, but let's talk a little bit about the PowerPoint. I've got a PowerPoint that I'm using for today, just for from a concept perspective. We need to talk still a few concepts, and one of the ones that I want to talk about today is this idea of reactive programming. All right, we have to build up to that in a second. So what is reactive programming and all that stuff? So again, we're talking about mean CRUD. Good luck trying to get that working today, but we're talking about mean CRUD. It's always difficult, by the way. So we want to try and how do we organize the Angular module? We're going to do that. Introducing Angular HTTP client, which we're going to use the service to kind of consume it, right? And then we're going to implement a new module and as well as update the components. Okay, let's see how we're going to do this. All right, so again, we've been using CRUD already with Express and Node, right? So we have Mongo already. The 3 of the 4 letters, we got them, right? We got Mongo, Express, and Node. And today we're supposed to try and start Angular. And we've been kind of failing to do that. That's why I started with one. The first piece is the Restful API. You can't do full CRUD with Angular and mean unless, well, there's many ways to do it, but you need a Restful API for the most part. Now, you don't have to do it that way. There's definitely other ways to do it, but why not show you the Restful API piece, right? So really, there's 2 structures. There's the Angular part, and there's the Express part, okay? The Express part is done. We've had a CRUD now since before the midterm, okay? So now it's not like that. Now we just got to get this Angular module working, and we need to use, the components, the proper components, the service we have to install, and routing configuration. All that has to be set up so we can use Angular, and that's what's causing us a bit of headache today. All right, let's talk about the HTTP module, right? The HTTP client, right, is the ability for us to consume or eat this REST architecture, right, that we've kind of established. So almost like we have these endpoints. I want you to think of whenever you hear endpoints in your mind, I want you to think about these web pages, right? These web pages that I'm able to pump out this JSON data. That's our endpoints, right? So I'm going to take that JSON data, that endpoint, that RESTful endpoint, and consume it with an Angular service, and take that data, spin it, and kind of redeliver it out on the Angular end, which means that at the end of the day, we won't have to use Express views at all on the back end. It's simply going to be done all on the front end, right, with Angular. That's where we want to get to, all right? But that's going to take a bit of work to do, all right? So we'll see how that goes. Okay, now, one of the things we have to do, we're using something called the observable pattern. Oh. And this is where people get really confused, right? The reason why is because JavaScript is asynchronous in nature, right? So basically what we want to try and do, if it was synchronous and if it waited, if I made a call for it and then suddenly it wouldn't do anything unless sending me my information, that'd be fantastic. But that's not how web pages work, right? Web pages continue to work and function. It's a stateless protocol. And so because of that, things happen in the background, especially with Node, because Node is using an event-driven model, right? Where we keep on triggering events and listing for events every millisecond, right? And so that you can have many, many users accessing the website at the same time, it moves on. So let's say Ali makes a request. As an example, it goes into the event queue, and then it moves to the next tick, and the next tick, and the next tick, and it keeps ticking to the next event, check. And it keeps checking. Meanwhile, my request is still being processed, right? But it's still checking the event queue. The event queue is still clicking around. So think about it as a clock. the hands of a clock, just still moving. They're still checking every tick. Meanwhile, my event's still being processed, not finished yet, right? So I've already done other things, and now I'm coming back to resolve this event, right? This is why it's asynchronous. It doesn't happen in order, in a sequence. It happens out of sequence many times. And that's a problem for us when it comes to data. I request data, and then I try and display it on the page. But guess what? I haven't got my data yet. When I put it on my page, I get errors. I get null objects because you know what? I'm requesting data, and I'm expecting, bam, I got my data, and here it is. That's not how it works. You request your data. As you're delivering your page, you check to see if you've got your data. Oh, I got my data now. Cool. Now I can load my page. And if you don't do it that way, you have a problem. And the way we've been doing it in the past is using something either that we're using the callback mechanism, right? Or we can use, let's talk about this, the idea that we're not serial. We either use a callback mechanism or promise pattern, right? Where we have a, we do kind of, we're waiting for something to happen, something to resolve, and if we get if it resolves or fulfills the promise, then everything is great, right? But the problem with this method is it's not scalable, and promises only work for a short lifespan, and they only work one time, right? So whenever we're going to, well, again, we're looking at the clock, right? And as we're listening for events, keep listening for events, and then we're going to have to do one promise after the other. That means we got a lot of promises in the wind happening. That's not what's going to happen. There's going to be a queue, and the queue is going to be filled up with promises, right? And they're going to resolve whenever they resolve, right? It ends up lifting up the overhead a little bit when it comes to this kind of stuff. And so we had to think about a different way of doing this thing, right? Something that went along with the event queue. And so we thought about this idea of this observable pattern. This observable pattern is not new. This is something that actually exists in software. And the way to do that, of course, is by using a method called reactive programming. This is, maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't. But the idea for us to react to a stream of data, not necessarily an event, but a stream of data that we're watching, right? That's what an observable is all about. It's a little bit different in terms of the way we're thinking. All right, so here's an example. So let's say we want to track all changes made to a text field and implement an undo functionality. So to do that, we can use a callback to get our next text change event and then record all the changes and do something with it. And then, but the problem with it is that this can be, end up going into something called callback hell, where you call back and the callback has a callback and the callback's callback has another callback until finally, either you're in 10 levels deep to get it done programmatically, or you can't do it. You can't think your mind around it, how it can be done, right? So we have reactive programming for this. And Angular introduced this because they realized there was a problem with this in their approach. Angular 1 and 1.5. So what is this doing? So this tracks asynchronous data. So I have a bunch of asynchronous data that's coming at me. I don't know when I'm going to get it, but I'm watching the stream, right? I subscribe to the stream as a subscriber. And as the asynchronous data comes in, the idea is that I react to it, reactive programming, right? So I trigger an event based on the data that I'm watching. And I can get things like values, errors, or maybe even a completion event. Here's my completion event. Cool. I saw it. I'm triggering a, I'm going to trigger this other event. Okay. The best way to look at it is like this. I think this is right from the book too. So you have a bunch of these. This is a stream of data. You have a bunch of values being changed, and you're watching. This arrow is where you're watching the event stream, right? And depending on what happens here, you can react with an event of your own or some kind of function. Okay. Again, the observable itself is the stuff that you're looking, and it keeps emitting different kinds of data in the stream. Okay. This is the idea of observables. The observable itself is the data stream. That's why it's called observable, something I can observe, something I can subscribe to, right? So I can observe as a subscriber. Observable pattern actually is something else we use in object-oriented programming and design, right? Because a lot of times what we don't want to do is we do not want to inherit, right? We'd want rather to watch or observe another pattern and use it, consume it, as opposed to inherit from it. Okay. So again, the reactive library, it's cross-platform, right? It's not just for JavaScript. Again, this is a software pattern that's been around for a while. Okay, it's not new. But the version that we're using is called the RxJS. The JavaScript version is RxJS that we're using in Angular 2. Right? Let me get back to the HTTP module. So for RxJS, if I looked at my code again, just to show you this, if I go back to my package.json, you can see that I've loaded a bunch of stuff in here, right? Well, one of the things I've loaded in way from last week was this RxJS. It's already here. So I already load RxJS. Okay. It's not like I have to do anything special for me to get this part. Okay. Figure it out, Aaron.
Yeah.
Huh?
What?
You figured it out?
Sort of. It gotta work. Not the way.
It's working, Captain. Sorry. there is no. It's either working or it's not, right?
It is working.
That's what I want to hear.
It's a list of games.
Wonderful. All right, I want to know what you did. So we're going to talk about that in a second. All right, so we have our HTTP module. We need to load. So the only way we can use the service that we're talking about, we have to create a service, and we're going to use the HTTP module in order for us to do that. So we have other modules we've loaded into Angular already. We're going to add another module. It's another component, another plugin that we're going to add in order for us to make all this work. Any questions around reactive programming? I'm going to put it on your test next week. You know, you're going to have a big, I'm joking. There's no test, right? Seeing if you guys are awake. Yeah, there's no test. So reactive programming, we talked about that, the observable pattern, observables, what are they, right? And if you're going to describe observables, it's just an observable is a stream of data, right? You can also look at it as an object. The whole object itself is the observable, right? And what we can do is we respond or react. Reactive programming, we react to, you know, an observable and the changes that are made, things that the observable is emitting, right? Events that the observable is emitting, we're going to respond to them and react to them with our own code. Why is that important for Angular? Because we've got this stream of code, this JSON data, right? And we're going to use it as an observable, right? We're going to get it asynchronously. We're going to make a request from the system. The system is going to spit out the stream of data. And as it comes back, when we get it all, the completion event, then we're going to display it on the screen. Okay? Like Ajax, but a little different. Are we clear on this stuff? All right. Changes we have to make. Let's talk about just making some basic stuff work. All right, so when we relaunched this thing again, and I did this in the first class, we had a bit of errors, and again, Aaron helped us out with this one. So let's talk about if I go into the client side now. So if I go into clients, and if I go to my app component, right? Here we go. Notice how we have this inline templating right here, right? This is right here in template. But what if I want to do not just inline templating, but also some different styling, right? So I got my selector, which is my app, right? This is a custom selector. And if you look at the views, so if I go scroll down into on the server side, if I go to server, and if I go to, sorry, close this up a little bit. If I go to views in my server, and inside my server, I go to content and index.ejs, you can see that in here, I'm loading in, I'm using the my-app custom selector that's inside of my index.ejs. And when I run the file, when I run the program, right, so if I go back to home for a second, so I go back to home, I actually get this, hello Angular. But hello Angular is not coming from this, it's coming from this. This is where it's coming from. So my app, the custom selector for Angular, is actually, we're injecting content right in here through Angular 2. Right, so Angular 2 is using Express, right? The Express backend has a view, and we're using the custom my app selector, right? And the way we did that, to enable that, we did two things. In the header. In the header, notice we're including a header at the top here. In the header, we're including something called an base href right here on line 4. Okay, and then instead of just using a footer, right, for my file, I'm also including something called angular.ejs. And angular.ejs, if you notice, it includes all the shims and additional data that we need, especially the system.js, .config.js file, the system.js.config.js file, this configuration file, because our browsers are dumb and they don't understand AngularJS right now and ECMAScript 6, we need to include some of this stuff to make it easier for us to compartmentalize our code, modularize our code, as well as understand how to use Angular. Okay, that's what this does. On a very high level view, 50,000 square feet, or 50,000 feet, I mean. Square feet is not that hard. 50,000 feet in the air. There we go. A very high level view. So that's what this does, right? So what I want to do here in my module, right, app component here, my app component, instead of having my template here where it says hello Angular, I want to separate this out into its own template file, right? Now you guys did the tour of heroes, right? So you should be familiar with this syntax. I'm just going to take this away. I'm actually going to cut it, right? And what I want to do is, instead of my template being here, I'm going to use template URL. Change that. And I want to point to a URL that I don't have yet that's right inside my same folder called app.templates. I'll call it template this time around, Aaron. .html. Okay. Also, I want my own styles, right? Notice that there are two styles I can use. I can use styles or a style sheet. And I want to use style sheets, obviously. So I can do inline styles, or I can do style sheets. Let's do style sheet. For style sheets, it's an array of sheets. And it's going to, again, point to the location of my style sheet. So I'm going to call it app.templates.css. So app.template.html, that doesn't exist here. And app.template.css doesn't exist here either. Let's put them in. So I'm going to right-click on app, new file, app.template.html, and paste. That's my template, right? Get rid of these backticks. So what it should do is, instead of reading in line, it should read this file, app.templates.html. In fact, we'll make it so it's colored blue. We'll add in an ID, or ID of hello, right? ID of hello. Whenever we have an item with an ID of hello, we're going to color it blue and make it so that it's 50 points, 50 pixels high, right? Well, I want to do that in my custom CSS, which is my app.template.css, which I don't have. I'm going to right-click here on the folder, right-click, new file, app.template.css. There we go. This is my CSS. And I'm just going to do what I normally do with the CSS. I'm going to say app.name or hello, what I called it, right? And my hello is going to say the following. My color is going to be some kind of cyan. I think I want to make it dark cyan. There we go. Not a blue, but a dark cyan. And you know what? I also want my font-weight. Font-weight. I'll be okay. To be bold, right? There we go. And I also want my font size to be 50 pixels, so really big. Okay, so we've got some stuff. I got a custom CSS I want to use, right? By the way, you can put this inline as well. If you wanted to put this inline on the same page instead of using a style sheet, you could. But why? If you can do it like this, it's much better, right? So I've got my CSS and HTML. And so now if I go back to my original page, which is this, and if I refresh, if I did everything right, and I didn't, by the way, then I should get that. But I'm getting this. And why am I getting this? No, something else. We found that if you try to do this in my app module, app component, my app component here, and I'm trying to access this, it's a pathing issue, right? It's really like app. Let me show me the whole path would be something like this, like app and / my app template, and same thing goes with my URL. I think it's this. And if we refresh and go back here, then maybe it'll work like this. See? That's what it is. Why is that? Because even though I'm inside this, I'm going back out to here because client is part of the path. I've included client as part of the path and everything else. I can just go up one to app, and we're good to go. I don't have to change that other stuff. Or even the common.js module. I don't have to change that either. Okay. Well, this works just fine. All right, so now I get blue, a big blue or cyan, dark cyan, hello Angular. So I can modify each component. This is where the power of Angular comes in, if we can get this going. That's why I'm getting so frustrated today, right? The power of Angular is we can control each component, each custom selector, so we can have its own style, just like we normally can. And it's in a micronized format, still using style sheets, but in a format that we can see and control for each page. Each page can have its own CSS. It's nice and small. Whatever changes you want to make. If you want global CSS, something that we want all the pages to have, we still use our regular style sheets. That's not going to change. But if we want something that's only for that selector, for that one time, something that's specific, it makes that whole hell of a lot easier, as opposed to targeting it with CSS, right? Okay. Questions around this so far? What I've done? You guys got what I got? No. Some people are nodding. Some people are saying no. What happened? All right. And are you getting the thing that says, I'm still loading? If you're seeing the still loading page, that means that it doesn't look like this. Make sure that your selector, my template URL, the path, it should look like this: app and then app template.html or app template.css. The other thing to do, if you want to really mess it up here, is we worked out another way with Aaron to do module ID. That's the other way to do it, where the idea is module.id. Now I want to see this if this screws us up. When I did this, I think it might. Let's see what happens here if I put my module ID up here. Refresh. I'm like this again, right? However, now I can take this away, right? So I don't have to do this at all. It's the other way. And if I refresh, I'm back. Right? So module ID actually passes in the module ID locally and allows me to see stuff without the pathing. Now, for today's example, for now, I'm going to take this out for a second. I'm going to go back to the other way. Just for a second, just to show you this. So, because I'm thinking that pathing might be the problem with one of our issues. All right, so I'm going to go to here. Cool. I go back to here, refresh, we're still good, right? Notice momentarily it switched. All right, the challenge. Here's the challenge, okay? We're going to take a break now. It's like, it's time to take a break. It's 2:14. We've been going strong for about an hour and 15 minutes, right, or so, or an hour and 10. Let's take a short break. When we come back, the challenge is going to be, how do I set up first the architecture for the roots, right? So I'm going to set up my Angular architecture, like things like, hey, let's get my service going. Let's break out my module. I'm going to have a games module, right, that I'm going to set up, a games component. And I'm going to have a subcomponent of a list, because I can do different things with my game. I can list, I can do a create, I can do an add, I can do a delete, and I can do it all on one page, right? We'll come back to this. I know am I killing you yet? He's dying. Okay, we'll come back and let's make it 15 minutes, guys. 10 or 15, get your coffees, come back, and we'll continue.